Hello, welcome to this virtual PD on some tips that I've found useful, I guess, in this first week of remote teaching that have helped me engage my students and manage my teaching and things like that. So I'm going to be going through them in this presentation and showing you how to do some of the things. So to begin with, I sent this around to everyone already, but I'm finding this really useful to keep a virtual roll for attendance. And I've just been color coding it here in this system as well, with obviously green is good, orange I'm a little bit worried, and red starting to get more worried. Now obviously we have not been told that we have to keep a record of every single day, but I'm just still finding it more useful so that I can see how students are tracking. And I did add another option of NA, because I guess I might not be asking students for something that I can see in every lesson. So in that case, I can have an NA and not be worried about that. But the other thing that I have been doing is keeping my mark book in an Excel document as well. And that's just another great way of seeing at a glance how students are tracking. When they don't hand something in, I color the box the first color of the light red, and then as it gets later, I often will increase the shade of the red to show how late it might be. This column in green is one of set of SAC marks, so I've made that in green so that it's easier to see. And students who I'm still waiting on a draft of writing, I've just marked orange there so that I know that I need to follow up with them. But just on that, if you hadn't realized you could do this before, if you want to avoid having to type all your students' names into an Excel document, you can go into your class on Compass, and under where it has mark the roll, you click on the link there called class list CSV, and that just automatically goes into your downloads. And when you open it up, it gives you the class list of names, and you can just copy and paste that into a document, which is handy. Number 3 is Compass submissions. It sounds like we're all going to be encouraged to move to that soon anyway, and Mark has obviously already put up instructions of how to do that in the instructions for teachers on Microsoft Teams. So I won't go through how to set it up, but I'll just point out some of the things that I've found useful about it so far. So obviously when you do enable submission, then you can see how many students at a glance have submitted things so far. I've also been finding it useful, especially for VCE classes, given that SACs are now, at least for the present, not going to be looking the same as they had when we weren't remote teaching. In the English team, for example, we've been talking about smaller hurdle tasks that we might be using now to help us demonstrate that students have achieved an S. So just having those, getting those submitted and being able to see in a glance that, for example, last week's hurdle task for the Year 12s has been done is good to see. When you actually click into one of those specific learning tasks that you've enabled submission for, this is what it's going to look like. So when you click on the tab that says detailed results, a list of the students, whose names I've blacked out here, will come up, and you can click on specific students to see what they've handed in to you. So yep, that's the tab there. This side column here is useful at a glance because it shows you green ticks for who's handed in on time, yellow for who handed it in late, and red for who hasn't handed in so far yet. You can also see if they've attached something that they want you to look at. On the left-hand side, that icon is showing that a student has submitted a file, and on the right-hand side, that shows that I have given them feedback on that thing so far. So if I look at an individual student, this is the section here where I can see what they've submitted, and I can download it to have a look at it. And then I can give my response to that student here that they'll be able to see once I publish it. So I've done 2 options that are available to you. One is I've uploaded a document back to them with feedback, but I've also just given a quick conversational note there too. There's also a box to give comments so that they can read it as well. And the final tab that you see on that option is the grid results. So I've got a list there of some grades that I gave to some students. If you had comments enabled as well, it would show the comments that you gave to that class also. And the handy thing I've since seen about this as well is that you can also export those grades. So again, if you've got your class set up in a role in Excel, you can just download that, and rather than having to individually type each student's grade, you can just again copy it and paste it over. I've already shared this with everyone as well, but obviously it's really handy to have students submitting work through Compass. This link here shows you how to do it from the student's end, and just incidentally, if you click on that link, it's now hyperlinked. If you want to be able to do that through a PowerPoint, you go to Insert in the PowerPoint, and right down the bottom there's a link that says hyperlink, and it brings up the table on the right hand side here. You click onto the web page option, you copy and paste the link and click OK, and then anyone viewing this PowerPoint, if they just click on that link, it will take them straight to the YouTube link. But this is obviously going to be really crucial because I've already had to delete a bunch of my emails already this week from my inbox getting overcrowded with things that students are submitting. I have not yet done that archiving your inbox option because it confuses me. So if anyone would like to give me a PD on how to do that, I would love that because I can't figure it out. So another thing I have already shared is pre-recorded lessons. So that YouTube link there will give you a guide on how to do that through Zoom if you haven't looked at that already. This is my YouTube account that I've set up since we moved to online learning. You can see I've got 14 subscribers so far, which is pretty exciting. I'm probably going to be set up to become a YouTube influencer, and not have to teach anymore after this. I'm probably going to become famous. Anyway. Another really good thing that I trialed this week was doing Kahoots remotely. I think most people already know how to use Kahoot, so I'm not going to explain how to set it up, but if you were interested, it's a really great way of doing games with the class, and I'm happy to show you, or I'm sure anyone in your KLA would be happy to show you how to set it up. But Kahoot, since we've moved to online teaching, has a new option to allow students to do games remotely. So you can either do it in class with them virtually, and I've trialed this and it works pretty well. If you click on the teach option while you're doing a Zoom lesson, you can project the Zoom screen and your students can play along with the game, and you can all be talking at the same time. But you can also assign it and just put the link in a learning task on Compass so that students can do it at their own pace at some stage in the lesson if you're not Zooming them for that lesson. So it's really great just in general for breaking up a lesson or for starting a lesson, so that students don't have to focus all their energy for 45 minutes on one sole task. But it also gives you an understanding as the teacher of how students are going, because you can see at the end what scores each students get. I normally just make a 10-question quick Kahoot. But the other thing I used it for this week, which was handy, was to track attendance. So I assigned a challenge. If you click on the assign option for self-paced learning, it comes up with this square here on the right hand side, and it lets you assign a challenge. So you say when you want it to be available and till what time. I just made it by the end of the lesson, so they had to have done it that lesson. And you click create, and I'm just going to show you what it actually looks like. Stop sharing and actually get into it. So when you click create, it comes up with this option here, and it has a challenge link, so you can copy and paste that and put it in your Compass learning plan, or you can give the students the challenge pin as well. And when they click on it as a student, it comes to this screen. This is, for example, a Kahoot on the names of the school subjects in Italian. So when I set this for the class, I reinforced to them that I wanted them to use their own names, not nicknames, so I know who they are and who's done it. So if I put my name in, it will load up. and ask me which subject is l'italiano. Oh gosh. Yeah, Italian's a pretty easy subject a pretty easy language to understand sometimes. Anyway, so it looks like that. And then at the end, if I just go back into my PowerPoint again, once the deadline is over, it generates for you, the teacher, a list of how everyone went. So for example, this is my Friday class. And so it shows me who my top students were. Oliver, for example, loved it so much he did it 3 times for some reason, but that's fine. But that link up the top here that I've circled in red. Is it gone? This one here. If you download that, it gives you a full list of names for the class. And I just use that because I didn't Zoom the class that lesson to mark who had done some work for the lesson, which was handy. Another thing that I think is going to be important, given that we're not having that day-to-day, or I guess at least face-to-face interaction with students, is I've started in my class roles as well. I've made a column for shout outs to check in terms of making sure I'm getting around to each student and just praising them for something, at least at some point for the term. So I'm just marking if I see a student's done some good work or had a good interaction, that I praise them in some way. And I don't know, it might seem a bit pedantic, but I am starting to just make sure that I've said something nice to all of them. So I think that's going to be one possibly important or workable way of just maintaining or developing good relationships with the classes. The other thing it's been good for is when I've been setting a class task that, for example, I don't want to read absolutely every student's work. Actually, have I done this? Yeah. So this is my Year 9's Compass, for example, and on Thursday, I set them a task and I just asked them I said they didn't have to finish it. I just wanted them to upload whatever they'd done for that lesson. And you can see 22 out of 25 of them did. I couldn't be bothered downloading absolutely every kid's classwork because I wouldn't get around to absolutely every kid in a normal class anyway. So I just picked a few random kids to download their work and have a quick look at it. And you can see in the next lesson plan, I've just given a quick shout out to James, who did a good job of it, and just given a little excerpt there of what he did. Just to, one, I guess it shows the other kids an example of what a good response looked like, but I'm also sort of sneakily just reinforcing to them that I am checking the work so that they don't get lazy and stop doing it, I guess. Another option is you could track shout outs by maybe every now and then just sending a quick email to the student or their parents, letting them know that you think they had a good insight or they did a good job that lesson or something like that. Who doesn't love positive feedback? Or even when you do Zoom the class, just letting people know who'd done a good job and things like that. I think we maybe don't do enough of that in general, or I let it fall by the wayside sometimes. So I'm happy that I am going to start trying to track that now. Another way of seeing who's checking in with things is to get students to do a reflection task. So for example, this is one of my classes this week. I guess it's particularly pertinent because this class has just finished one unit of study and they're moving into another one. But again, I didn't Zoom the class this lesson, but I still wanted to, because I'm a bit anal, I guess, I still wanted to know that they'd logged in some way. So the task that I got them to submit for this lesson was just to write me a couple of sentences about how they found a study of Romeo and Juliet. How did they challenge themselves to be resilient? How did they challenge themselves to be creative? What did they learn? And I just got them to upload that to Compass as well. And that was my way of knowing that, that was only a 5-minute task, but that was my way of knowing that they'd logged in for the day. But I guess just in general, it could be a good idea to set a reflection task at some stage just to check in, give students an opportunity to let you know how they're going. I've shared this blob tree in a prior PD, but I'll attach it here again. You should be able to see that if you're looking at this in its PowerPoint form, if you click on this blob tree, if you double click on it rather, it should open up as a Word doc that you can save for your own use. But this is good because you give the blob tree to the students and they have to indicate to you which blob they are, how they're feeling at this point in time about whatever you're teaching or even just learning from home, and give you a little explanation. And I found that to be pretty effective. You get some surprising answers about who is feeling confident but might not have been speaking that much in class, or who might have a brave facade but is actually feeling a bit nervous or worried about something. So it gives them an opportunity to let you know that without having to say it in front of the rest of the class. The best thing I did this week was use Google Docs, especially in my literature class where I rely on group discussions a lot. I don't know about you, but I've been finding, even though Zoom has been great for behavior management in a lot of ways, I've found it harder to generate discussions with the class because, I don't know, I guess maybe they're feeling like they're all in their own little isolated bubble and might be a little bit nervous to speak up when you, feels like sometimes, for me at least, that you put out a question to the class and it just sort of disappears into the ether and no one quite wants to put their hand up to give you something. I mean, that can happen in a normal class as well. So one activity I did with my year 11s this week is I posted an activity into a Google Doc. I'm not going to explain how to work Google Docs in this presentation, but again, if you're interested and you'd like to know more, I'm happy to explain that another time. But I gave the class a task to make some annotations on this essay or a couple of essays that we've been reading about the importance of being earnest, and to make comments. And I gave them about 15-20 minutes at the start of the lesson to do that initially, and then after that we came back and discussed it as a class once they'd had time to sit with it themselves and think about it. I guess it's sort of the equivalent of, as close we get to a think, pair, share at this stage of learning. So what was great about this activity is that because it's a live document, students could see what other people were commenting, and that they could comment on each other's comments and learn from each other. It also meant that by the time I did Zoom the class, I wasn't just blindly having to pick on people to give me some thoughts. I could see who'd already done some thinking and call on them first of all to say what, to expand on their ideas a little bit more. Not everyone could access the Google documents, so some of them had just done it in their own workbook, so then I was calling on them to tell us. But because I was sharing my Google Docs screen, when someone else was giving me some feedback, I was typing it in, so again, everyone could see it. And yeah, again, it gives you a record of who's done some work for the lesson. So you can see here just the beginnings of some of my students who'd started to make some comments on that document. The one drawback I'd found on the Google Docs is ideally I would like to have been able to save this so that students could read it, but when you save this Google Doc, it doesn't save the comments. So I don't know, maybe someone out there knows another app that's better for doing that. I'd love to hear that. So if you're not aware of how to add comments in a Google Doc, it's pretty simple. You just highlight whatever section you want to make a comment on, and then this plus button appears in the sidebar. You click on the sidebar and then a comment appears. You write your comment, click comment, and it saves it. And finally, I guess I don't want to preach to people, but this is something I've had to be thinking about, so I'm sure all of us have, is just looking after ourselves, looking after our physical health and our mental health. Now, probably more than ever, is a good time to, I don't know, I guess go easy on ourselves, go easy on our students and each other, because we don't know how everyone is dealing with this remote learning situation. Yeah, I've found it useful, or I've tried at least, to get outside every day. It is pretty brutal, as I'm sure you're all finding, sitting in front of a screen all day to do these interactions. If you're not yet interacting with the Batuta Advocate on social media or just looking up their website in some way, now would be a fantastic time to start reading this. It's so funny. It's in some ways my main number one news source that I first go to. I'm not ashamed to say that. And I'm going to leave you with this guy, Jeff Van de Zandt, who's become a little bit famous on Instagram lately. He's my favorite person that I'm currently following. So I'm going to share with you one of his Instagram clips that I thought was really funny to finish this presentation.